let's move on to our final topic of the evening, and that is a sweetheart guy. No. It's a guy named Joseph Stalin, a very controversial figure in history. And Mike, you're going to tell us a little bit how he might relate to business strategy and maybe a 5-year plan, something like that.
Yeah, hold on with me as I go through this because people will presumably react strongly to this story. But I'm going to make the connection between promises, the causes of the world in those promises, and then the people on the ground who have to execute those promises. So we're going to relate to the 5-year plan. But I want to give you a little bit of the backstory of what was going on, the context when Joseph Stalin came to power. So he came to power in the Soviet Union, and they had sort of this Marxist-Leninist philosophy, methodology, and the idea of Marxism was what? It's a deterministic historical process where you can go from feudalism to capitalism to socialism and then ultimately to communism. The problem with Russia at the time when Stalin came in was it was barely getting out of feudalism. And so they believed, and this was part of the debate between Trotsky and Lenin and then ultimately Stalin, that you could leapfrog the sort of capitalist industrialist stage and get straight to socialism. And you needed this avant-garde leadership to do that with the scientific knowledge of how the currents of history develop. And the way they would do that was in these set of 5-year plans. And they did develop a lot. Literacy went up, right? They got factories everywhere. But they had a persistent problem of the 5-year plan not actually being met, right? And so the whole idea was, and this is where we look at univariate causes, when the avant-garde leadership says this is scientific, these 5-year plans, what is the explanation when you don't meet them?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I don't know. You get tossed off a bridge.
You get tossed off a bridge. And we're going to come to the meme because this story is going to lead up to that very picture. Well, because socialism is scientifically correct and you're going to jump to it, and the 5-year plan is the step, you're going to do it stepwise, right? You're going to reach it. They had a pre-planned list of people and a causal model that said, if you don't reach the plan, it's because you're not committed. You didn't execute the plan. Maybe there are spies. Maybe you're kulaks. Maybe you're later Jews, right? So they had this whole list pre-planned so that if the plan was not met, they would do what with these people?
Vanish.
They would vanish them. And the most famous one was a guy named Nikolai Yezhov. Before the plan was even going, he's the guy on the right. Nikolai Yezhov was the head of the NKVD. And they had a pre-plan to arrest something like 220,000 people and to find those guilty by definition, because they were in the group of people that were by definition sabotaging, undermining Soviet progress. And then there were 76,000 that were to be executed. So they already had their pre-planned headcount reductions from the very beginning when the plan was not met.
Yeah.
So the irony of the whole story here is that Yezhov put this system into place, executed it, right? Because the only explanation for not reaching the plan was a lack of commitment, a lack of execution, sabotage, spies, working with the United States, the capitalist powers. So you get rid of those people, you arrest them, and you execute them. He, ironically, later was executed by Beria. Beria is the very infamous NKVD guy who came in after. So an analogy in history is the Salem witch trials, where we predetermined that there were witches, right? And then we found them. Surprise, right? The Soviet Union, they predetermined that there were people undermining the plan, and they got rid of them. So what does this have to do with business? Have you ever done corporate budget planning or forecasting?
I've done forecasting. Sure.
The way this thing works is your department typically will do a bottom-up budget, right? And you'll hedge,
Yeah.
right? At the same time, the leadership of the company is putting in a plan let's say in a market that grows 3%, we're going to grow 10%. And maybe now we have 8% EBIT, we're going to have 15 in 5 years. Right? So that's the overall plan. Then you're building your bottom up one. And what happens when you submit the plan?
You get less than you asked for.
You get less budget, but you get higher targets. Right?
Of course. Yeah.
It's called stretch targets, right?
Yep.
And what behavior does this unleash in the corporation? This is where the analogy starts to get haunting a little bit. That in corporate, that target is the truth. 10% growth, 15% EBIT. The numbers are the numbers. If you're not hitting your numbers, no excuses. And that gets pushed all the way down the organization. And then what happens the rest of the year?
You got to enforce that.
You got to enforce that. And how do you enforce that? The people who are not hitting their numbers, they either have to, they get let go, right? Because the only explanation for not hitting the numbers in a corporate environment is what?
You're not doing it, or you're not trying.
You're not trying. Commitment,
Yeah.
right? It's not the fact that you set a 10% growth target in a 3% environment. It wasn't the case in the Soviet Union. Maybe it was the case that they had the wrong target, that they couldn't actually produce that much in 5 years because they just weren't there yet. Or, a drought happens. They don't have the technology. It didn't develop like they thought. Something happens in the world. So the point there is there's not only one variable when it comes to these targets. The world is a vast place. It's multivariate, right? So in corporate, it often is simply downward, you blame it on execution. What happens when they don't meet their targets? Strait of Hormuz, the Trump tariffs,
Right.
right? Inflation.
This economy.
Yeah, exactly. It's the economy. It's outward, which is closer to the truth. It's a multivariate world.
Yeah.
But downwards, they create, and I write about this in the book, and this is the pernicious effect of this mentality. If you assume a target is correct, then it's a deterministic management environment where everybody gets treated as though the only reason, as you said, you're not meeting targets is because you're not doing your job well. And I'm sorry, that's bullshit. The whole setup is bullshit because there can be many reasons that you don't reach your targets. Take the PayPal chart earlier. They dropped off a cliff. Did any one of their workers not perform the job well? No. It was AI hype. Probably the workers went back to work and did the same job they've always been doing. Stock crashes. Is that execution? No, and we talked about this earlier too. In such an environment, it's very difficult to tell the truth, right? Because if you come up with the truth, what does it sound like to leaders? You're making excuses.
Yeah.
Real leaders execute. They find a way to get it done, even if the target was wrong.
I can say it, as we're not in Stalin's government, I can leave. If I'm a talented salesperson, I can tell you from a sales perspective, there's going to be one guy in your org that's like the best, and he's going to be taken care of. Like he's going to get the good accounts.
Yeah.
He's going to be taken care of. But the number two salesperson's still really good and can have options. They're going to leave. They're going to be gone because they're not making the money that they feel they should because the opportunity isn't provided or there or easy, whatever. So it's really hard you can't just leave under Stalin. I can't just leave my country.
You can get airbrushed out of the picture.
Yeah, I can get erased from history.
Yeah, but it's not true for everyone.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's say you're 55-ish. You got a family you're putting through college. What's the probability somebody at that age is going to get rehired quickly?
Well, that's not that. Don't say that age at 55. 65. Let's say. Okay, fine.
No, it's difficult. It's difficult, and it depends on your position.
Yeah.
Right. And my bigger problem with it is, yeah, you can leave, but you shouldn't even have to leave. You shouldn't even have to go through this.
Yeah.
People wonder why there's not risk taking and innovation in corporations. And a lot of it has to do with this deterministic environment that's created where it's no excuses. You can only hit your numbers by any means necessary. But you can't control the whole world around you. So things happen in the world. That's not always your fault, right? And you have to take risks in an environment like that. When you take risks, it costs money. You're not going to hit your targets. So that's one of the major reasons that you don't see so much innovation, because people will keep asking, why aren't corporations using AI? Why aren't they innovating with AI? Well, one of the major reasons is they have these targets set that are strict, where they have to produce the cash, the revenue, right? And the present model is going to be squeezed to death to reach those targets. It takes a very, very courageous person in that environment to introduce AI in a new business model, which costs money, it's uncertain, it's risky, it probably won't produce the cash by the time that annual target hits. That was my long way of getting to why people ask me all the time, why aren't corporations innovating? Well, this is one mechanism, is that because they're governed by the annual P&L, it is extremely difficult, and it's understandable why those leaders don't take those risks. Innovation costs you EBIT. It costs you the target if you're wrong. And the payoff comes beyond the year. So you don't want to get airbrushed from your company. What do?
You gotta
You execute.
get the
You
numbers.
do everything you got to hit the numbers by any means necessary.
Yeah.
So that also gives you some sense of why you're seeing AI layoffs. AI, I'll put it in quotes. It may have nothing to do with, it's cover. I have an EBIT target that I'm going to meet come hell or high water. AI is going to cover. And if we don't meet it, AI is also going to cover. Ooh, there's a lot of disruption on the market. You've seen the SaaS market. There are headwinds for businesses like ours, right?
It's
The
interesting to
analogy
me.
doesn't hold perfectly, right? I know people don't like to use like an example like Stalin, but the mechanism is similar. Assume a truth that may not be true in the first place. The problem is the target, right? Not the actual world and the workers.
That's fair. I mean, you could use we could have used like maybe Bobby Knight, a basketball team.
Yes.
He
Yes.
all that matters is the results. You got to get me the results.
Yeah.
And this is my hard-nosed regime. Anyways,
But don't throw a chair at your employees
I mean,
or the judges.
it definitely makes him a very imposing figure. So I find that stuff interesting. I really do, especially that I feel that pretty personally, because just this past couple of years in my previous company, we've had some very unrealistic numbers come down the pipe.
All companies.
It's crazy.
And you know what's crazy about that? This is the part that really gets to me. If you want to put a target on them at the top and you want to propose a project for them to implement, to change something, to innovate, they make you do so much damn research. Hire McKinsey, hire a Bain or KPMG or whoever to justify it.
Yep.
It takes a year to get a decision, if you ever get a decision. When you ask them the methodology for how they got that number, what is it? Pulled it right out of their asses. And it's simply something like, we can do better.
This
We
will
can do
move
better.
this will move our stock price. Yeah.
Yeah, we can both increase revenue at a rate we never have, and no one in the market is, and EBIT simultaneously. That is not easy to do. It's rare because it costs you money. We're an American culture. How do you make money? You got to spend money. You want to grow at that rate, it's gonna cost you EBIT, unless you're Allbirds, right?
That's
So that's
very
just
true.
the stock price.
That's very true. Yeah.
No, but
Well,
new
then
markets
execute.
that are blowing up, that's possible. But in saturated markets where a lot of corporates are operating, hyper growth when you've never done it before and no one else is, and you put down these insane targets, you can only imagine the morale of that company. And that's not just corporations. That's also NGOs, that's government as well.
Yeah.
You get those environments.
Well,
Xerxes whipping the sea, right? We can't control the sea. Sometimes the sea is the reason.
I'm hopeful for smaller companies to come along. It's just the nature of the beast. Like you grow a company to be so big and large that now it's just a behemoth piling along, doing what it's doing, and it's designed to keep making money and do it cost effectively, and it's been set up that way. And to change that it's a very tough and heavy lift. And that's just going to go. And it's just going to go that way until you've milked all the money out of it you can, and it's going to fizzle.
Yeah. And you,
It's going to get bought up.
the
Or,
type of person that you attract in a system with so many layers of hierarchy and processes, they're usually political operators.
yeah,
And
for
it's
sure.
very hard to attach accountability to them when they're sitting on the top. It's easier to attach accountability getting closer to the ground to the projects. Although they're accountable, it's very difficult to remove them. Typically, the boards are reluctant to remove top leaders because that also has an effect on the stock price, usually, right? But one of the great hopes of AI, and I know a lot of the people out there, they're seen as too positive, too naive, is that we can extract people perhaps from those types of corporate environments where that 55-year-old person could now just leave and run their own business, right? And
Hmm.
the other thing that AI might be able to do, this is where I have great hope, is show what actually caused the failure. That means you have to look for it, right? So if it's something's wrong with our value proposition, your salespeople could be inputting that into a system that collects the information and surfaces it. If you have an AI looking out at the competitive environment that can do market intelligence on the fly, you can surface what's actually causing it. Right? So the days, I think, this is my great hope, the days of the bullshitters at the top that aren't held accountable because they can blame it on anything. Now you could possibly bring more transparency to what's happening from the bottom all the way up to the top and attribute what's going on to real causes, not just execution, not just commitment to the plan. Maybe something else really did get in the way.
So,
Maybe it's your bad projects that you put into place.
well, how about when, Tim Cook makes a bad decision, AI looks at it and says, well, your CEO made a bad call. And then Tim Cook bitches to Anthropic or OpenAI, whatever, says there's something wrong with your model. Like that's a lot of power, he's wielding to.
No, that's true. That's the counter argument to my side, is if that's possible. But what if the regulators hold the power, hold the model? What if your board actually does governance for once,
That's a weird
instead of
thought.
being just instead of just being golf buddies, and they actually use AI models that can test the strategic theses of the CEO in real time? What if they had to be accountable for their statements
Crazy,
and their theses?
crazy.
But one of the problems I have with the P&L is it's too abstract, right? Like 10% growth, 15% EBIT. That seems like very specific, but there's not one mention about the how.
Yeah.
And the how is where your theses, your hypotheses have to come in and you test them.
Well, no, the how is your digital transformation, right? It's
That's right.
some buzzword is the how. Some
AI, productivity,
Yeah,
efficiency.
AI adoption is going to get us to an extra 10%. Why?
Yeah.
Why
Well,
wouldn't it?
we're doing an AI transformation right now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
this year you're going to start seeing it.
I don't think.
And this is to investors. Again, back to investors and boards. Use AI to ask the questions like, what is the real how? And is it feasible?
Yeah,
Do you have the capabilities? Do you even have the business model? Do you have the customers? Do you have the channels? Do you have the distribution? Do you even have these revenue models? If you're selling hardware and you suddenly say we're going to make AI, do you have that capability?
maybe.
We're going to sell SaaS, but then we're going to make hardware. Those are conflicting business models, right? So this is what drives me insane is that at the buzzword level, everything sounds good. If you start drilling into it just a little, and this is where my hope that AI can do this, and this is the tool we're building, right? Like it can do it already.
Yeah,
It's getting there if it's deployed to the right causes. And I think this is a great cause to do it for. is these people are making multi-million dollars to spout out huge targets, insane targets that cannot be met, layering buzzwords over it, and it's hard to hold them accountable. We talked about this. There's got to be some innovation at the governance level. There just has to be.
Yep.
We haven't innovated on our governance models really since the World War, post-World War, where everything was a widget.
Well,
I'm exaggerating. But
make sure you save a spot on your board for whoever's going to bring in the most business. Like that's what it's for. It's an honorary position in a lot of regards.
Well, and then there's the trade. Hey, I'll put you on my board. Put me on yours.
Yeah.
I mean, and then there's director's insurance. So if you made a bad decision, if you made a bad decision as a board director, you're covered. So for me, that's where there's some great hope is if we could innovate there at that board level to really start holding people accountable.
Yeah.
There's no other way. Because right now it's difficult. People down below get held accountable, but it's hard to hold accountable upwards because it's just so easy to play the game of abstraction.
Yeah. Well, everyone wants this year's bonus or, a short-term bonus, short-term gain, and they're not paying attention to the long-term anymore just because
But why should you?
So big. They're so
why
big
should
and
you?
so powerful.
Why should you? Like CEO terms are 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Just hold on. Because that's a very human thing, right? You can empathize with them. I'm sitting at the top of this massive pyramid, 100,000, 200,000 employees. I don't have half the information I would need to make this thing work, not even close. I don't know if anything I'm doing is working, but I'm going to pretend right, as best I can. I'm going to cover it. I'm going to sell the story, the vision. And then when the bill comes due, I'm gone. And the good thing about when the bill comes due and I'm gone is you can just blame the new person. Right? Like, I'm not saying that's the mentality. It's just the structure again.
You mean we're going to be 2 years into the next CEO and they're still going to be talking about Biden?
Exactly. Well, it's so easy, right? It's so easy to do. And when let's say you're the former one, hey man, everything was working when I was there. We were hitting our targets. We had a digital transformation going on.
Right.
We were testing new businesses. We were getting traction. New person comes, falls apart. Right? By the way, there's a good book I think it's called Power Game. It's about GE and that transition from Jack Welch to Emmett and the rest, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
Very, very, very good book. And it talks about a lot of these dynamics, like managing earnings or not, speculative, and all of the power plays that go on in that kind of environment. What kind of leader do you need? And they were under massive, massive pressure to hit their targets. So that comes from the market too, right? It's not just the behavior of the top level. The market selects for that behavior. It's the incentives. Just like rolling it back all the way back to the SPACs.
Shell company.
It is what it is. But that was an innovation. I would like to see some innovation on the corporate structure side.
Well, we'll ponder how to infect that change, and we'll get back to you.
And now you know who was disappeared in that picture. If there's anything you take from this whole session, maybe that was the useful thing. Trivia question.
All right. Well, very interesting, Mike. I appreciate the history talk, as always, in strategy. Hey, you've just watched a clip from Show Your Priors podcast. We hope you liked it. Check out our main channel for full episodes, or also anywhere podcasts are found. Give us a like, subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything, but helps us out a ton. We'll see you back next week.